All right, guys. So now let's get into the actual graphing it when given an equation. Okay, so we have two types of graphs, the cosine and the sine, and they're basically the same thing. Okay, except remember one of them starts at the top at the maximum, and the other one starts at the midline. I'll just write that right here. This one starts at the midline, and this one starts at the maximum. Okay, so let's take a look at these two equations. We have y equals a times cosine of b times x plus c, and we have y equals a times sine of b times x plus c. Notice they're the same equation. The only thing that changes is cosine and sine, okay? But let's go over what a, b, and c refer to, okay? So a is the amplitude. So easily, you just look at the equation and it'll tell you what the amplitude is. You don't have to calculate it. The amplitude is always positive. Keep that in mind. Now, B is the frequency, and that's what we're going to be using to calculate the period, okay? So now think of this as the speed on a YouTube video. So you know on a YouTube video, you can slow it down or you can speed it up, right? So think of that as the frequency, that's B. And we'll be using that to calculate the period. And then finally, we have the vertical shift C, which is also another word for the midline. So we won't have to calculate the midline anymore by looking at the maximum and the minimum. We will just be able to look at the equation, and the midline will be whatever C is. It could be a negative or it could be a positive, okay? So let's begin here, okay? Notice here we have the first equation here. It says calculate midline, amplitude, and the period, and then graph, okay? So notice this is A. I'll put a little a right there. This is B. And then there is no C, so you can think of C as being 0, okay? Remember, we have two graphs. One has sine, one has cosine, so we're looking at this one here. So we have A is at the beginning, and then we have B right in front of the X, and then C is always at the end on the right side, but there is no C here, okay? So notice here, A here is which one? A is the amplitude, so the amplitude here is 3. So I go ahead and write that amplitude, that's going to be 3. Okay, simple like that. B is the frequency, but remember, we're going to use the frequency to calculate the period. Okay, so notice here it's 2 pi over B. So what we're going to do here is we're going to calculate the period by doing 2 pi over 3. Okay, so there it is. That's my period, 2 pi over 3. That's it. If I can reduce it, then I do it. But if it can't be reduced, then that's your answer. So the period is 2 pi over 3. And what about the midline? What is the midline? Well, remember, the midline is whatever is at the end right here. But since we didn't have anything here, then that means our midline is going to be 0. Or, I forgot to say, it should be written as y equals 0, not just 0. Okay, so the midline is always going to be an equation of y equals, and then some number, okay? So that's it right there. We have the three things. Let me write them so that they're all together. So we have the amplitude is 3, the period is 2 pi over 3, and then the midline is y equals 0. Remember, the period is what it takes to complete one full cycle, okay? All right, let's do the next one here. So that's A. B is the invisible one there, and then C again is not there. So let's start with the amplitude. The amplitude is A, which is 4. So that's my amplitude, and the amplitude is always positive. Now let's do the period. Okay, so remember the period is going to be 2 pi over B. So this will be 2 pi over 1, right? The invisible 1 there is B. So then this will just be 2 pi. Okay, and then finally the midline is going to be, well, whatever C was, but it's nothing, so it's 0. The midline is 0. In other words, oops, I forgot again. The midline is y equals 0. Next one here. So we have the amplitude. Right, that's A. B, there's no C again. So the amplitude is 6. The period is going to be 2 pi over 4. Okay, and so we're going to do reducing. We're going to reduce here. That's going to be pi over 2 because that's going to be 1/2. So I just write pi over 2. Okay, and then the midline is going to be y equals 0 again. Okay, we have 8 of these to complete. So let's do this quickly here. There's A, there's B, and then there's no C. Okay, so again, the amplitude is going to be 3. The period is going to be 2 pi over 2. And so that's going to simplify to just pi. And then the midline is going to be 0. Y equals 0. Okay? Notice here, A, there's nothing there other than an invisible 1. That's B. And then C is actually 0. Okay? So this is an invisible 1 here. And so here we have the amplitude is 1. The period is going to be 2 pi over 5. So that's it, 2 pi over 5. And then the midline is going to be 0. Oop, keep forgetting. It's going to be y equals 0. Okay? All right, notice this one here has A, B, and then C. Okay? So here we have the amplitude is 6. The period is going to be 2 pi over 1, right? That's an invisible 1 there. And so that's just going to be 2 pi. And then the midline is going to be y equals -3. Okay, 2 more to go. Notice this one here. We have A, B, C. Okay, so the amplitude is 8. The period is going to be 2 pi over 2, which is just pi. And then the midline is going to be y equals -8. And finally, oh, there's a fraction there. We have A, B, and then C, which is 0. So this is going to be, amplitude is 12. The period is going to be 2 pi over 3 halves. Wow. Okay, so how do we do this? Well, remember, this is the same as saying 2 pi divided by 3 over 2, right? And so when we divide a fraction, we multiply by the reciprocal, so that'll be 2 pi times the reciprocal, which is 2 over 3. Okay, I can make this into a fraction like that. I could have done it here too. And so then I just multiply across, so that's going to be 4 pi over 3. Okay, so that's my period. And then over here I have my midline is going to be y equals 0. So I had a lot of zeros on my midlines. So now it says, and then graph after you calculate those 3 terms. So how do we graph this? Well, I have some graphs here, okay? Now remember, a sine curve, remember, starts at the midline, right? So we have this right here. It starts at the midline, goes up, and then down. That's a full cycle, okay? If it's cosine like this one here, you just got to remember it starts at the top, and then it goes down like a bowl, and it comes back up, okay? That's a full cycle right there. So that's what we're going to be graphing. If it's sine, it's going to look like this. If it's cosine, it's going to look like this, okay? So let's do the first one here. We already have the information that we calculated, okay? So notice here we have the period is 2 pi over 3. Now notice here I have some markings here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go ahead and do 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm going to go ahead and put 2 pi over 3 right here. Okay, 2 pi over 3 is going to be my period. Okay, in other words, my sine curve is going to end right here at this line right here, this invisible line here. Now remember, sine looks like this, like a letter S, right? So I know that this one's going to have the behavior of going up, down, and then back to the middle, okay? So how do we do that? Well, remember the period is 2 pi over 3, okay? And then the amplitude is 3. That means from the start here, it's going to go up 3 at the next tick mark here. And I'm going to have a point there. So at the next tick mark, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. I'm going to put a point there, okay? And then on the next tick mark, I'm going to go back to the center. And on the next tick mark, I'm going to go down 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay? Remember, my midline is 0. I wrote it right here, y equals 0. So that's going to be where the middle of the graph is. Okay? So right here is going to be the midline, this one right here. Okay? And so, again, I marked the 4th tick mark here. That's going to be the end of the cycle. So from the center here, remember, sine always starts at the midline. So I'm going to go up. Let me go ahead and do this in blue. I'm going to go up, down, touch that point there, and then come back up right there. That's all I need to do there. Okay? that would be the end of one cycle. If I wanted to do it again, another cycle, I would just go 1, 2, 3, 4. That would be the end of my cycle right there. And I would just do it again. On the next one, I would start from here. On the next one, I would go up 3 because my amplitude is 3. 1, 2, 3. On the next one, I would come down. Remember, it goes right back to the center. And the next one here, I would go 1, 2, 3. And I would end up right here where I started. Notice? So use the 5 points as a guide. Okay? If I want to do it one more time, I would do the same thing. Okay? Next one. Y equals 4 times sine of x. Now we did that over here. What is the midline? Y equals 0. So this is going to be my midline there. Okay. And again, my period is going to be 2 pi here. So I'm just going to count 4 tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And that's going to be my end of the first period. The full cycle will end right there at 2 pi. Okay. Don't worry about these markings right here. That's not important right now. If you wanted to calculate those periods right there, I mean, those markings right there, we could, but that's not what you need to know today, okay? Now notice here, our midline is 0, and then our amplitude is 4. So from 0, I'm going to go up 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? And so, again, this one's going to be a sine curve. So it's going to be just like this one here. It's going to start at the middle like a letter S. It's going to look like the letter S, okay? So basically, it starts right here. And then from here, instead of going up 3 like over here, I'm going to go up 4. So I'm going to right here, I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And I come back down to the center. And I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4. And then end up right there. So let me go ahead and connect those two. Okay, so notice how this one's a little steeper, a little taller than this one here. Okay, so both of these are sine, and that's it. I only need to calculate one period here. Okay. Oh, look at this one here. We did this one also, right? We did all these. That's this one at the bottom here. Okay, so we said the midline is still 0. So that's going to be this one right here. It's going to be the middle of our graph. Okay. And then we said the amplitude is 6. But look at this. I don't have space for 6. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually count by 2s. 2, 4, 6, 8, right? That gives me enough space to go up to 6. And let's do this one. -2, -4, -6, -8. I don't need the -8, but I just wrote it because that's the next one there. Okay? So we're going to do the same thing though, except this is cosine, okay? Oh, and notice here, our period is pi over 2. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to count 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? And that's going to be my first period right there. So remember, it starts at the 0 and then it goes 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's really 5 points. It's this one here plus 4 more. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay? So how does this one work? Well, remember, the cosine always starts at the maximum. So my maximum is going to be at the top of the amplitude. Remember, from 0 to 6. So it's going to be up here. Okay. On the next point, it comes down. Right? And then on the next point, it goes all the way down to -6. Okay. Then it comes back up like a letter U, right? And so we go back to the center. And then at pi over 2, we finish the cycle at the top. Okay. So it looks like a letter U. So it looks like this. Okay. And if I wanted to continue it, I could continue it, right? I would just go again to the midline. And on the next point, I would go down to -6. And then on the next line, I would go back to the midline. And then on the next line, I would go up to +6. Because remember, my amplitude is 6. So from the midline to the maximum or the minimum, it's going to be 6. But remember, we're counting by 2. So 2, 4, 6. All right. What about the next one? Okay. So that's 4. So let's look at this one here. 4. We did it already. The amplitude is 3. Remember, our midline is 0 again. So it's going to be from 0. And then we're going to go up 3. So we have enough space here to count by ones. 1, 2, 3. And then -1, -2, -3. Okay. Now what's our period here? It's just pi. So I'm just going to count 4 tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be the end of the period there, okay? And so my first point, since it's a cosine, just like this one, it starts at the maximum. Where's the maximum? Well, at 3, right? Because from the midline to the maximum, we have 3. So this is going to be the maximum, okay? And then on the next tick mark, I'm going to be at the middle. On the next tick mark, I'm going to be down at -3. On the next tick mark, I'm going to go back to the middle. And then on the last tick mark here, I'm going to be at the top right where I started. Same level as where I started. Okay, so I always end where I started. Okay, so let's connect. Okay. What about this one? Cosine of 5x. We already did this one here. Remember we said our period is 2 pi over 5. So we'll count 4 tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's 2 pi over 5. Okay, so at that tick mark, that's where the cycle ends. And then our amplitude is 3 and our midline is 0. So again, we're going off of the middle line right here. And our amplitude is 3 again. So that means since it's a cosine, I'm going to start at the top. So 1, 2, 3. That's going to be where I start. On the next tick mark, I'm in the middle. On the next tick mark, I'm 1, 2, 3 down. And on the next tick mark, I'm back to the middle. And then on the last tick mark, I am at the top where I started. So remember, you will have 5 points altogether for each of these graphs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so let's go ahead and connect. So it looks like the one we just did right here. The only difference is instead of 5 pi or 2 pi over 5, it's just pi. But it's basically the same graph. Okay, the numbers just change on the period. Okay. What about this one here? Remember, this is going to be number 6. That's going to be our midline, -3, which would have been right here, -3, okay? But remember, from here, I need to go up 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That'll work if I'm going up, but it won't work if I'm going down, okay? So let's just count by 3s here so that it'll help us fit the graph on this actual blank graph. Okay, so I'm going to go -3, -6, -9, -12, and then this will be +3, 6, 9, 12. Okay, so if my midline is at -3, that means this here is the middle. Okay, now from here I'm supposed to go up 6 for my maximum, right? So my amplitude, remember, is 6. So from the midline, I'm supposed to go up 6. So if I'm at -3, right, that means I'm 3 away from 0. So that's 3. And then that's another 3. That's 6. So since cosine starts at the top, that's going to be where my graph starts. Okay. Oh, and I forgot to say, this is going to be 4 tick marks again from the start. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's going to be our period, which is 2 pi. So this is going to be 2 pi right here. Of course, it's actually right there is the middle, but still 2 pi right there. Okay, so all of this line is 2 pi, so that's where we're going to end the graph. Now, notice here. So we start at the top. On the next tick mark, not right here, but right here, we're going to go to the middle, to the midline. On the next tick mark, which is right here, we're going to go down to -6. So we're going to go down, actually 6 down. So from the midline, remember, we're counting 1, 2 up from the midline here, but we're counting by 3, so it's 6. So we're counting 2, 1, 2. Okay. On the next tick mark, I'm back up here, and on the last tick mark, I am from here 1, 2. So I'm at the same level here. Okay. This one was a little complicated, so I'll do it again. So it looks like this and like this. So let's go over the points, the 5 points. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, again, this was our midline because that says -3 right there. And then remember, our amplitude is 6. That means from the midline to the maximum or the minimum, it's going to be 6. So notice we're counting by 3s. 3, 6. Okay, right here, 3, 6. So each of these spaces counts as 3. And so we're actually 6 away from the midline. Okay, but then since it's a cosine here, we start at the top. On the next tick mark, we're at the midline. On the next tick mark, we're 2 down again. Okay, 2 times 3 is 6. And on the next tick mark, we're in the middle and then up again, right where I started. 2 more to go. And so this is number 7 here. notice our midline is -8. Okay, so I don't have enough space, so I'm going to have to count by, I guess I'm going to count by, let's see, can I count by 4s? 4, 8, 12. Yeah, that'll work, because if I'm at -8 and I go up 8, I'll be still within the picture. Okay, so let's do that. So I'll just count by -4s here, -4, -8, -12, -16. Okay, and right here, this will be +4, +8, 12, and 16. So my midline is -8. That means this is my midline right here. Let me do it in blue. Okay. And now notice here, my period, what do we say here for number 7? My period is pi. So just count 4 tick marks, 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's going to be the end of the cycle. So the cycle will end on this line. And then lastly, we have the amplitude is 8. So from here, I got to go up 8. So up 8 and then down 8. Okay. Now remember, this is sine. So sine all starts from the center. So that's my first point right there. So at -8. Okay. And then from here, I'm going to go up 8. Okay. So I'm going to go 1, 2, because each one counts as 4. On the next one, I come back down. On the next one, I count back down to the very bottom. And on the last one, I end right where I started. So this is my curve. And that's it right there. All right, and finally the last one here. Okay, so remember, we did this one here. So the midline is 0. So that's easy. We just go from here. Okay, and then our amplitude is 12. Now notice here, we don't have enough room to count 12. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we're going to have to count by 4s. Let's do that. 4, 4. Do it in pen. 4, 8, 12. And then this will be -4, -8, and -12. We are not going to need a 16 or a -16. Okay. 4 tick marks. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's going to be 4 pi over 3 we calculated. So that means my cycle or my period is going to end right at that line. Okay. And so how do we do this? Well, this is a sine curve. So the sine always starts at the middle, at the midline. And then on the next tick mark, we're going to go up the amplitude, which is 12. 4, 8, 12. We're going to go up here. On the next tick mark, we're going to go back to the center. And on the next tick mark, we're going to count down 1, 2, 3. That's -12. And then finally back to where we started. So it's like a letter S. And that is it.